This used to be me, a shy, quiet, insecure girl. And I used to hate it when people used to call me shy or quiet because I felt like it didn't really do justice to everything that I felt I was on the inside. I had a lot of stuff bubbling up inside of me that I wanted to express, or I wanted to express myself in certain ways, but I was just too insecure to do so. And I wasn't able to due to my deep insecurities and fear. So the only thing I was projecting onto the world was that I was shy and insecure. And then I would get angry when people used to describe me as shy, even though I didn't really give them something else to describe me as. That's all I projected onto the world. So in retrospect, I can't even blame the people that saw me as shy and quiet because that is all I portrayed myself to be. Because I was just so scared of expressing myself in any sort of way for fear of being reprimanded for it or for fear of feeling like weird. I had a lot of different interests and different contradictions about myself, and I think everybody does. Felt like I had to fit into this one box of being shy and quiet or be nothing at all. Thing is though, after I healed like a good chunk of my insecurities and fears, I realized that I am a quiet person, but it didn't feel like an insult anymore. I held it in a different way. Back then when I was a teenager, it felt like a negative thing to be quiet, because I felt like that was the only thing that people saw me as. Before I went on my whole healing journey, I was quiet, but not because I chose to be quiet, because I felt silenced by my fears and insecurities. Post 2022, I started learning all these different contradictions about myself and started really like learning who I am as a person intrinsically. And I realized that I am a quiet person, but not because I was fearful anymore. It was because I enjoyed observing people in silence instead. I find a lot of peace and wisdom in observing people and the world from a distance while also living in it. It was now a point of power. I can sit back and observe people from a distance, but I can also assert myself and speak when I'm spoken to or when I feel called to speak. I don't have to demand attention. I can garner it just by being myself. Instead of feeling like being quiet was the entirety of who I was, I held it in a different way, and I started to see it as a refuge as I got to know myself more. I could always go back to being my quiet self as I got to observe the world and observe people, and that taught me a lot about myself. It was kind of like a safe space that I could go back into while I got to know myself more. I think nowadays, and even back when I was a teenager, there was a lot of different aesthetics, like clean girl, soft core. I don't know. I feel like people like to fit people into boxes, and I think people like to be fit into boxes as well. And personally, I think it does such a disservice to humanity and just how complex and contradictory people are in general. Nobody just fits into one box unless they make it that way. Nobody is just a nerdy girl or a shy girl or a smart girl. We're all contradictory people. And I find that when you step into that, when you tap into your contradictions, is when you actually tap into who you are and the authentic version of yourself. A label can be given to you, but you are the one that chooses to accept it. I chose to accept that I was a quiet and shy girl because I was too scared of doing anything else. I was too scared of expressing myself another way. Because I chose to accept that label, I also projected myself as that person. And so people started seeing me as that person. So a lot of it was in my control and I didn't even realize it. And most of it was due to fear that I was feeling that I couldn't step into another box or that I couldn't step outside of my box, because I think there's also like a fear of making people uncomfortable. If, your family and friends know you as one thing, I found it very uncomfortable to step outside of that because I didn't want to make them uncomfortable. It's kind of like a world shift, right? And so I found I had to get more comfortable with making people uncomfortable. And that's not to say like being disrespectful or rude in any way, but just being able to step out of the box that you've created for yourself. And so therefore they see you as that, and being uncomfortable with that. It's not until I healed and like started to step out of my box that I could finally express myself in whichever way I deemed fit for the time in my life. As I expressed myself differently each day, and it's not like radical changes, but I expressed myself with whatever felt true in the moment for me. And that was kind of like tapping into my authentic self. I didn't put myself in a box anymore. I wore different outfits. I didn't stick to one aesthetic. Sometimes I was very talkative and social, and other times I just stayed quiet. And I did whatever felt was true to myself in the moment. I wasn't restricting myself anymore to act like just one thing to keep everyone comfortable and to keep myself comfortable too. I started to express myself in whichever way I found was true to myself in the moment. I wasn't trying to act like one thing no matter what situation and what environment I was in anymore. And I think being able to be flexible in terms of how you express yourself is also very important. A workplace versus with your friends should be different. I hope it's different. They both should represent who you are truly. What I found to happen was people couldn't pin me down anymore. They couldn't fit me into one box anymore. And I started realizing this was happening when I started working at a coffee shop as a barista, and I would get a lot of different labels. Some people would think I was a party girl. I would go out every weekend, and I was like, I haven't been to a club in 2 years, and I hate the taste of alcohol, so wrong. People would think I was like a studious, smart girl. Some people would think I was a player. People would think I was like in a serious, committed relationship. Some people would think I was like 15 or 16, and others would think I was in my late 20s. It was just like, I don't know what energy I'm giving off, but I'm giving off a very mess of energy right now, and I don't know why, but I felt really comfortable with that. I went from everyone getting the impression that I was a shy and quiet and insecure girl to everyone having their different own impressions of me depending on their perspective. And I think the most important part is that I never took any of whatever they thought I was as the truth. I never took any of their impressions as the truth anymore, because I could have easily given into what people thought of me and became that. People thought I was a party girl. I could have become a party girl to fit the image that they created for me because of my self limiting beliefs that I couldn't be 10 things at once. I find that if everyone was connected to their truest, highest self, everyone would be a myriad of contradictions. You couldn't pin anyone down. The only people that you can put into neat little boxes have chosen to be in those neat little boxes, because whatever you accept as the truth, you will start to subconsciously and consciously become it and project that onto the world. When I started tuning into my most authentic self, my highest being, whatever I was passionate about, whatever gets me up in the morning, whatever makes me feel so excited, and I started expressing that in different ways, whether that be creatively, through what I wear, through how I act, I started stepping out of that box and breaking out of the box that made me feel so restricted in the past. And this is still an ongoing process. I think it's never going to be a process that you have down to perfections, because there's going to be some environments where you revert back to who you were back then or who you projected onto the world back then. But I think whenever I tune back into what I'm passionate about, what makes me excited, who I feel I am intrinsically, that's when I really stepped out of the box that was placed on me and that I took as the truth. People didn't see me as just one thing anymore because I stopped expressing myself as just one thing. I carried myself in a way that was open to life, open to experiences, open to people. I didn't carry myself with fear anymore, because when you're going about the world in fear, you're scared of everything. You're scared of what people think of you. You're scared of life experiences. That fear makes you shrink, while openness makes you whatever the opposite of shrink is. I forget the word. No, I'm not saying this is an easy process. It really forced me to like dismantle everything that I believed about myself and about the world, and it's really scary and uncomfortable, and it requires a lot of courage. And I think it boiled down to one question that I kept asking myself over the years. Is this really how I want to live my life? Do I really want to look back when I'm old and gray, when I'm on my deathbed, and my life was full of fear and regret? And I tune into my highest self. Is this what she would really want? And contradictingly, my highest self was who I was as a child, like 5, 6 years old, however I expressed myself then. And I expressed myself then in a myriad of ways. Whenever you see children expressing themselves, they never ever put themselves in boxes. They cry when they feel sad, they laugh when they feel happy, they dance, they sing, they create. They're just existing. They're experiencing life in all of its forms. They're not restricting themselves into staying this poised, composed person no matter what happens in fear of being judged. And obviously, as an adult, it's different because, like I said, there's environments where you have to compose yourself into formal situations. But composing yourself should never mean changing who you are. It should just mean tuning into what is the best way that I can show up in this situation right now that doesn't restrict me, that still makes me feel open to life. I think the number one way to tune into your highest self is to think back how you were as a child. What were they like? What were they passionate about? What were they excited about? creatively, how would they express themselves? Who you were as a child is who you really are intrinsically, because it's before the world could impact how you view yourself. Trying to integrate that child version of you with the adult version of you is the best way to do it. So tune into yourself again. Step by step, day by day, you will find the version of yourself that you really want to be and that feels truest to you. But the first step is tuning into yourself. I know this is random, but there was one Emma Chamberlain video that I watched. I think it was the Silly Girl Summer video. And I remember I teared up. And I was like, why am I tearing up while watching this? It was not an emotional video, but I think it was because she was expressing herself so freely, so openly, and I was like, I was kind of in awe. She was just being silly and goofy, but I felt like it was just the truest version of herself, and I felt really inspired by just a silly little vlog. And I was like, wow, like I want to be able to do that. I want to be able to express myself that freely. But anyways, that's it. Okay, bye.